This small bet makes a ton of sense, and I think very, very good bet size to use. And personally, when using this, you often get folds, which is really cool, because imagine Stefan has, jacks no diamond, he's check folding, and there are lots of hands like that in his range. Hey everyone, Uri for Guerrilla Poker. Just want to start out by saying, last video I asked you guys to give me some more feedback about what's going on, and the response was really great. Lots of comments and lots of engagement, and I felt like I learned a lot. For me as a content creator, it's really, really enjoyable and important to have interaction with the viewers. So it doesn't feel like I'm just talking to myself, because there are so many things going on when you do hand analysis in poker. So many levels you can approach things at, and so many things you can focus on. So just want to say I appreciate it a lot. And to start off this video, I actually want to answer some of the questions that came up. In my last video, I was looking at a really big pot played between Caxton and Limitless. If you haven't watched the video, you're welcome to check it out. But to analyze the action in the end, I did a sort of trick that most guys won't do. The action was in an anti-spot with a straddle and then limp and a call, like this kind of rare situation. For most people's games, definitely for my games, and rather than create the simulation and examine the exact spot these guys were in, I took a BVB spot instead. There were actually a few comments saying that my choice was not the ideal choice, and that because this situation was a limp, a big ISO and a call, the ranges are more polarized, so it's more like a BVB 3-bet pot in terms of pre-flop ranges, and that changes the results of my analysis. Before even starting to say whether it's actually better to look at 3-bet pot ranges or whether or not the results change, I think it's very important to take a step back and look at what we're trying to do when we look at these high-stakes hand histories. Pretty much our goal is to learn how to play poker better for our specific games and to understand poker better. And while there is this element of, did Caxton make a mistake? Like, I really want to know, did he screw up or not? This is not really very important. Much more important is understanding dynamics and strategies and what's going on. With that being said, the analysis that I made in the last video, whether or not it suits this specific situation, and as we're going to see, there are a few issues with comparing it to this situation, it's still something that comes up often because it's a BVB spot and it's something we can learn from. So the principles and the conclusions that we took, I would actually rather look at a BVB spot than at some kind of weird straddle three-way anti-spot, because this is something I can learn and apply to my own games. So whenever you're analyzing a hand, don't be too results oriented, but rather try to kind of open your head, look around and see what you can learn for your games and for many situations, and not be focused on, no, this isn't exactly the right situation, it's not the right ranges, it's an issue. I think a lot of people get locked in with using computer programs to analyze poker, or generally with analyzing poker hands, at what happened in this specific hand, like, my opponent check raised all in, what should I do on this specific run out, where the bigger question is, how does a check raise all in range look? What should you do across various runouts? What kind of bluffs should people have? And once you start understanding that, which is what we were doing in the last video, you start being able to answer the question kind of across the board. With all that being said, I do want to say that I think the comments were good comments. Like ISO spot has a polar range for the isolator and a kind of tight range for the limp caller relative to BVB. So this will play more like a BVB 3-bet pot in terms of ranges. And in terms of SPR, it's somewhere in between a single raised and a 3-bet pot. So if we were to kind of look more accurately, I think this would be a better way to look at the spot. So 9-3 deuce monotone. Here we have BVB 3-bet ranges, the out of position Caxton, presumably limp call range, but this is a raise call BVB range. So small blind raises and calls the big blind 3-bet. We're getting abstract here. And the in position range for Limitless, very polarized, all the good stuff and a bunch of trashy stuff, just like the 3-bet range BVB. So were we to look at this and skip ahead to the river with the exact same action we had before, Limitless bet flop, checked back the turn, and bet a bit more than half pot on the river, the BVB analysis had Ike check shoving ace 10, ace jack, ace queen, but with the non-ace diamond. And this 3-bet pot analysis has the opposite thing happening here. It's the ace of diamonds check shoving. So if we think that this is a close, like a more accurate resemblance of the truth of what went on, then maybe Ike didn't screw up, like maybe he played fine. And here you also see something that we didn't see before, which is 9x check shoving. Now, I don't want to make this video too much about this. Obviously, ranges are tighter. BVB 9x was good enough to call, and there were a lot more flushes of all sorts of different heights and a lot more, offsuit Broadway type hands to bluff with. So ranges are different, but as long as we understand the principles of, we want to unblock the folding range, the bet folding range, and block the value range a bit. So I think principles are the same. Ranges get tighter. Suddenly having the ace of diamonds is more important, and you can turn the 9x into a bluff, which I had thought would happen with the loose ranges, but 9x was just too good for that. Kind of this funky thing going on. I don't think it's very important. For me, the conclusion was for single raise pots, BVB and probably big blind versus button, and that's what I took away, where you rather have the offsuit ace and the suited diamond, but tight ranges switches around again. So another kind of piece of information to have in your head. And with that being said, let's move on to a new hand from this video. I'm gonna look at heads up hand between Linus and Stefan Bura. I don't know the end of the name. I don't know if this is the Stefan, the guy who crushed Limitless in a challenge. Very, very good high stakes player, or it's a random Stefan. If I had to guess, it's probably a good Stefan. Right? How many Stefans do you actually have playing 200, 400 heads up versus debatably the best heads up no limit player in the world? We're about 125 deep at 200, 400. Linus raises, Stefan 3 bets, and Linus calls. We get an ace 8-5 two-tone board, kind of dynamic board. Stefan bets smaller than third pot, so indicating close to a range bet. Linus raises, Stefan calls. And at this point, if we had to guess what the ranges are, Stefan would probably bet 3-bet some of his ace, king, ace, queen hands, maybe some sets, some flush draws, and some bluffs, and I'm not sure specifically what I would choose to bluff in his shoes. Maybe a pair of 5s, maybe some backdoor draw. I have a feeling a straight draw I'd rather call because it's too weak to stack off. So a kind of tricky spot to come up with a bet 3-bet bluffs for Stefan. If you guys want to think about what those would be, I think that's an interesting exercise. And Linus's raising range could be all over the place. He could have 2-pair plus, he could have a random pair, he could have a random draw, or he could have some kind of backdoor draw. Now, the one hand he can't have is something like, 6-3 of spades. Generally, you take your bluff raises from your calling range and not from your folding range when you're playing against a good player. So there is kind of a limit, but he could have anything in the calling range pretty much, except for, pocket 9s or pocket 7s or something. So turns a 5 of diamonds, kind of tricky card. Presumably both players could have a 5 still in their range. Certainly both players could have flushes. And it does shift a bit, like how good is top pair? So if Linus were raising ace-queen, maybe he doesn't want to go for stacks anymore, but kind of creates a whole new type of nut hand situation. Stefan checks and Linus bets small, roughly a bit less than 1/3 pot. If you look at the board, the small bet makes a lot of sense. Always when you're betting at these shallow SPRs and it's not the river yet, you want to think a bit, does my value range need protection from anything? And here, if Linus has a flush or a boat, or trips, or even something like ace-queen, his hands have a very, very strong equity lock on the board. It's not like he's afraid of a random jack coming. He might lose, with a flush or trips to an ace that rivers a boat, or maybe Stefan has kings with a diamond and rivers a nut flush, but to price those hands out, you don't need to bet bigger than this. especially without much money behind. You don't need to be worried about implied odds. So this small bet makes a ton of sense, and I think very, very good bet size to use. And personally, when using this, you often get folds, which is really cool, because imagine Stefan has, jacks, no diamond, he's check folding, and there are lots of hands like that in his range. So check, bet, call. River, queen of clubs. A queen of clubs improves, ace, queen to beat ace 8, if that's a bit of a thing. It also improves pocket queens with a diamond for Stefan, which should still be in his range. But overall, not a very big card. I would say it favors Stefan more than Linus. So Stefan checks, Linus shoves. Value range here for Linus, I would assume it's somewhere around ace 8 plus or ace queen plus, somewhere around that area. Don't think he can really go for it with ace jack, and certainly can go with trips or flushes. So Linus shoves, Stefan makes the call, and we see the hands. Linus with a 6-deuce of diamonds, which, if you think, oh, this is so loose pre-flop, you have to look at the pre-flop sizing. Stefan 3-bets small, so Linus calls wider. Like these are adjustments expert players are making in game all the time. According to your sizing, they will call wider or narrower ranges due to different pot odds. So yeah, I think Linus's play makes sense completely, and Stefan's play is a bit spicy, it's a bit interesting. Looking at the board and looking at 10-8 of clubs, my first instinct would be this hand has no business calling the river, and I'm not even sure it has any business calling the turn. And this is very intuitive based thinking, right? Like, I'm not as experienced at heads up no limit as these guys, but looking at the hand, looking at the board, imagining your range, 10-8 of clubs just has nothing going for it here. You block 8s, but is 8s really such a big part of what's going on? I wouldn't be so sure. And to me, Stefan's call down looks very, very adventurous. But as I was saying, I have less experience in these guys, so I would like to check out what's going on. And to do that, we'll run a short sim and take a look together. Just as I was speaking about in the beginning of the video, I'm not going to have the exact parameters, because these guys are playing 200, 400, and the 3-bet size is not one I have saved. I'm not going to, spend a day running a sim just to get the exact ranges. So you guys are going to have to, like always, we're going to go out on a bit of a limb. We're going to look at principles, and Linus's calling range is not going to have 6-2 suited. It's going to have 6-3 suited. Does that matter? I would tend to say no, but we're getting a less accurate response for sure. So flop, Stefan bets small with most of his range, as we expect. And Linus has a raising range, and in terms of what's in the raising range, if you guys want to compare this to what I was saying, you guys can see there's some ace queens and ace jacks, there's some ace 8, 8s, 5s, 8-5 suited. We have some 5x, tiny bit of 8x, random bit of all over the place stuff. Now, maybe a good time to mention, I am coming out with a check raising course. Now, this is not check raising, this is in position raising, but if you want to understand what happens with these hand types better, that is something you will learn from the course. If you're interested in that, stay tuned for the channel. We'll announce as soon as it launches. But in terms of bluffs for Linus, like I said, anything that's making the calling range, right? So not 6-3 of spades, but like these type of hands can make it in there for sure. Queen 6 of clubs type of stuff. So we have a call, a raise. And here I was saying, what would Stefan 3-bet? You guys can see ace queen, ace king, ace 8, ace 5, the value range. There are a few pair plus flush draw, 3-betting, not really many flush draws, not really many straight draws. Bluffs, he's just going with random pairs, probably trying to block top range for the other player. Stefan has 10-8 of clubs, he calls, so far so good. 5 of diamonds turns, Stefan checks, and really good card for Linus. Here you guys can see Pio prefers half pot over Linus's size. Not a huge deal, and definitely not with your entire range. Not going to think about it too much. Look specifically at 6-4 of diamonds. Wait, where is the 6-3 of diamonds? It's not really raising. It doesn't matter. So Linus bets small. And here, this is where I was saying, I think Stefan should already fold 10-8. It's a bit deceptive, because often you rather have a pair of 8s than pocket 10s, because a pair of 8s has, an out to improve on an 8 or a 10. But given the board is paired, 10s improves better than 8x. because a 10 doesn't really improve 10-8 anymore. You're not beating anything new. And 8 is not as deceptive, kind of, or as strong. So you actually rather have pocket pairs, and all these 8x pure fold a turn. There's no continuing with them. You do continue some pocket pairs with no diamond, not all of them, just the lower ones. You can continue 8x with a diamond. That's the only 8x you can continue. So here, I guess my intuition is correct, and Stefan should have folded in terms of how big of a mistake this is. It's tough to judge. Solver says $600, but like, we don't even have the correct ranges. Certainly there's more going on here than that, so I wouldn't read too much into this. And then we have the random queen river, where, as I was saying, Stefan can improve to queens or ace-queen when he checks. I was thinking Linus would shove maybe ace-queen plus. Here you can see the threshold is actually trips plus the shove, and some bluffs. And when he shoves, what should Stefan do with his, like, what should he bluff catch with? Of course, Stefan doesn't have 10-8 suited. It's a slightly losing call. If you're gonna call, you might as well have a diamond and have like 10-8 with a 10 of diamonds. Like, those are your break-even bluff catchers. 10-8 of clubs is a bit too loose. Now, why is this play not as bad as it seems? All the solver's outputs are assuming the other guy is playing perfect. And we saw that if Linus is playing perfect, Stefan's call down loses him, 1.5 big blinds on the turn and 1 big blind on the river. So 2.5 big blinds, which is a big amount. But presumably one of two things is going on. Either, Stefan screwed up and made a 2.5 big blind mistake, or he thought that Linus was not playing the spot perfectly. Maybe Linus is unbalanced in a way where this minus 2.5 big blind call is actually making money. And for us from the side, we can't really tell. I guess the main thing that's kind of important to remember is, Stefan made a bluff catch, right? Like, his hand beats bluffs. So it's not terrible in any sense to call down with a hand that beats bluffs. There are matters of frequency and adjustments and leveling wars. But yeah, bluff catching versus aggressive opponents can never be too terrible, and sometimes it's a matter of blockers, sometimes it's a matter of reads. Calling down Jack 10 off would be bad, but calling down 10-8, not that terrible. Maybe Linus thinks twice about bluffing you next time. Maybe you get into this kind of leveling war. Maybe that works against some players. I doubt it would work too well against presumably the best in the world, so there is that. But, it is what it is. I think this is the way Stefan plays. It's good against some guys, bad against others. That's it for this one. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments what you think, any questions, any thoughts as before, and see you guys next time.